there, thanks for joining me today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator based in the UK. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card. Now it's a 3-tier slider card, so we're going to pull this tab. And as you can see, there's 3 layers. You've got your greeting, this is to write your little message, and this is the obviously the front of the card. Now this fits nicely into a C6 envelope, so it's our standard size here in the UK. So you can put another panel on there if you wanted to make a bigger greeting or do something inside. It's entirely up to you, but you get the general idea of what we're looking at. This is another one I made, which you may have seen. This is actually new paper that we're getting in the new annual catalogue. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's the Ornate Garden Suite, so it's got some really lovely little images on it, and I do like daisies. So if I pull that one, you can see I've done, just wanted to say thanks for all you do. And again, there's a little panel there for a short message, or obviously you can write further on the back. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to take a piece of cardstock. So I'm using Pool Party because I'm going to make that first one I showed you. And you need to cut this, so you leave it at its full A4 length, but then you're going to cut this way at 14.5 centimetres. Okay, we're then going to score that at 9.9 centimetres. And again at 19.8 centimetres. So that's the first panel. So the next panel I've used is thick Whisper White. You can obviously change the colours to suit whatever you're making. So this one is going to measure 24 centimetres, and this way it's going to be 10.5 centimetres. And this time we're going to score at 8 centimetres. And again at 16 centimetres. So effectively it's in thirds. Okay, and then finally with the little strip that you had left over from the Pool Party layer that I cut first, you're going to cut a piece that's 12 centimetres by 6 centimetres, and you're going to score at 6 centimetres. So effectively it gives you a square. Okay, so obviously that's your square, so we don't need to do any more with that at the moment. We'll start with our base. So if I just score this, it will just make it easier for you to see. Okay, so it's actually going to fold back on itself. Now sometimes, this one's not too bad, but sometimes you find that they won't lay quite flat. If that happens, you can just take a small sliver off the inside, and I mean a tiny sliver, but that one actually is sitting quite well, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. Okay, so that's our base. Now what we need to do is we need to actually cut into this part here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it in pencil because I think it'll be easier for you to see, and then I'll make the cuts afterwards, okay? So the first thing we need to do is to measure in from the sides. So we're going 2 centimetres in from each side. Remember, it's not quite 10 across. You do just need to move your ruler very slightly. Equally, you could use your grid sheet I'm using here to line it up, but I just want to explain it to you. So I'm going to put some pencil marks on here because this is going to be hidden inside, so we're not going to see this. Okay, so that's 2 centimetres in from either side. Now we want to do 2 centimetres from the top. So 2 centimetres from the top. And then we want to measure down a further 9 centimetres. So that would be, if you're going from the top, at 11. Again, I'll just quickly draw. You don't need to draw the pencil lines if you don't want to, but it just helps as a visual guide for you to see what I'm doing. So, okay, so we've got 2 centimetres coming in from this way, 2 centimetres here, 2 centimetres here, and then this part here is an additional 9 centimetres or 11 centimetres from that top part. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut into this. So we need to cut this line here and this line here. Okay, now if you're happy doing it in a trimmer, you can do it in a trimmer, or you can use a knife and a ruler, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, I'm going to pop mine in my trimmer. So I'm just going to line it up here. I can see where my line is. Just going to make sure that I've done it all the way. It's a bit further up. That's it. So that's now been cut. And then I'm going to move this one across. I'm going to do exactly the same again. There we go. So we've got effectively like a little pocket there. Okay, so that's for the base layer. Now we're going to do exactly the same again, and we're going to do it on the Whisper White layer, but the measurements are very slightly different on this one. And you will find with the Whisper White, this is what I mean by it not laying flat. So what I need to do is just to take a sliver off of that edge. As I say, you don't need to take a lot off, just a small bit, just to make it fold flat. So now when I close that, that'll fold nice and flat, and I don't get that bowing. Okay, so we're going to measure again. This time we're going to stay with 2 centimetres in from either side. So 2 and 2. Okay, but this time from the top we want to go at 1.5 centimetres. If I can see it on my ruler, there we go. And this time we are going down a further 5 centimetres. So effectively you're going down to 6.5. So again, I'm going to just draw my lines just for visual. You don't need to draw the lines at all. Okay, so just to recap, this is 2 centimetres here, 2 centimetres here. This is 1.5 centimetres, and then this is a further 5 centimetres, or if you're going from the top, 6.5 centimetres. And again, we're going to cut into these 2 places here. So again, I'm just going to pop it on my trimmer. Just line up that line. Just make sure you go down to the line. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, again, I'm just going to line that up. Can you see by drawing those lines, it actually makes it really easy just to line up. But I know some people prefer to use a knife, and that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, so now that we've done that, so there are our 2 main pieces, and then we've obviously got our little square as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the little square, and then we're going to work downwards. So first thing I need to do, I want to attach a little pulley. Now you can use whatever you want. I've used some circles on mine. This time I just happened to grab another punch. So I'm going to use this punch here, and I'm going to punch it out of just leftover cut pieces of the thick Whisper White. As you can see on this one, I actually use DSP, but DSP is quite thin compared to cardstock. So what I did is I actually cut 2 circles and stuck them together just to give it a little bit more stability here. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'll put those 2 out of the way for now. we're going to glue this into create our pulley. So what I did, as we've used the thick Whisper White, I'm going to leave it whole, but I'm going to stick it inside. Now you want it to, you don't want it to stick up too much. In fact, I think I'm going to go down to that line there. So I'm just going to glue this in place. So I'm just going to that line, and I want to make it equal distance either side. I'm just eyeballing it, I'm not obviously measuring it. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is we're just going to glue this flat down. So that is your first layer complete. But what I do recommend is that you add your decoration as you go. It just makes it that little bit easier really when you're actually going through stuff. So on here, this is where I have my greeting. So I'm going to cut a square that's 5.5 centimeters square. And I'm just going to use some offcuts from our Whisper White layer. Hope this is big enough. Okay, and I'm just going to stamp my happy birthday, and I've taken this stamp from the stamp set Here's a Card. It's quite a nice one because it's got a nice sort of combination of greetings, but I do like this one. It says, "It's all messy, the hair, the house, the heart, life." That just about sums me up at the moment. So that's quite a nice set. Okay, so I'm just going to ink my stamp. So when you're stamping, you want to stamp near the top, because I'll show you why in a moment. Sorry if my head just came into frame there. So I've just stamped my greeting. So as I say, the reason you want it to be near the top is because you actually only see that first part. So what's that, probably about 2.5 centimeters, something like that. So make sure your greeting is going to show. Now, provided you go near the top, you should be fine. But if you're unsure, you can add it afterwards. It's just easier to do it as we go. So I'm just going to glue that onto the top. Give it a nice border. I've cut mine slightly wrong there because I'm actually flush at the bottom, but it doesn't matter because that part's not going to be seen. So just make sure you get the nice sort of border here. So that is your first layer done. Now we need to actually cut some, just some DSP. Any scraps of DSP will do. They don't have to be the one you're using, although you've probably got it to hand. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut some strips. So our strips are going to measure, I'm going to cut this at 9 centimeters because that will do for my front as well. So you want one piece to measure 9 centimeters by 2 centimeters. Okay, and then you want another piece that's 7 centimeters by 2 centimeters. So I just need to trim that one. Okay, so there's our 2 strips. So I'm now going to go to my next layer, which is the Whisper White layer. And what I need to do is I need to thread this piece, sorry, the shorter piece, through my 2 slits that I made earlier. So I'm going to come up from the back. Oops, she says. Come up from the back, and I'm just going to weave it into those 2 slits. There. Okay, so I'm just going to push it to the bottom so I know it's in place. Just going to turn it over, and at the back I just need to gently push these over. Now don't glue those in place, they need to be free because that's going to be our pulley system. So that's that part. I'm going to flip it back on itself, and I'm just going to add some glue or some tape to this point. I prefer to use tape at this point for the simple reason that glue obviously takes a while to go off or to dry off, so I tend to use tape at this point just because it's easier, but glue will work equally. So I'm just adding 2 little strips on there. Take the backs off, and then I'm going to take my piece here. Now I want to have it equal distance here, but this bottom line is going to sit at the base of my piece of paper. Okay, so I'm quite happy that's lined up. I'm just going to sit that down. So that's your first layer done, almost. So this is going to be your pulley that is going to go up and down. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to fold this over and over again, and then we're going to glue it in place on the back. Now obviously you don't want to glue over the top of these because it's going to prevent it from actually moving. So all you need to do is to glue around the 4 edges. That's quite important because otherwise your pulley won't work. Or equally you could use a bit of tape just down one side. Okay, so I'm just going to glue that in place. Don't worry if that doesn't quite meet over the back there, because you've got some bulk in there now. So obviously that's going to be, holding it from flattening completely. Line it up a bit better. There we go. Okay, so that's your inside piece. So if we now test the pulley, they are a bit stiff to start with until they've moved a few times, and then obviously they get a little bit better. But you can see what I said about the greeting. I could have even done being a tiny little bit higher there, but I think that's fine the way it is. Okay, so that's our first layer. I'm now going to decorate this layer here. So all I did was I cut a piece of the DSP, and this time it measured 7.5 centimeters by 7.5. So again, this is actually the reverse of the one I was using. Okay, so I'm just going to glue that onto there. And glue that in place. As I say, you could decorate whatever you want to on here. Just avoid using things like 3D foam pads and things like that, because obviously it's going to become too bulky. I'm just going to cut another little square on there, and I think a 6 centimeters square will just be sufficient just to give me a small writing area. So again, I'm just going to glue this on top of my DSP. Yeah, you can make it a little bit bigger if you want to. A little bit more of this one actually shows when you open it, so you can see you do get a reasonable size. Okay, so now we're going to put that to one side, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other layer. So this is our top layer effectively. So again, I just want to weave my paper in from the back and across, and then push it down to the bottom. Okay, I'm going to flip it over, just level it up a little bit, and just fold over those ends. Now what you don't want to do is you don't really want to get like a really tight crease on this, because it does need that movement. So I'm going to flip it back again, and then I'm going to take some double-sided tape, exactly as I did before. I'm going to glue that onto my strip. As I said, don't forget to make sure it's at the bottom at this point. And then going to take my panel, middle panel, and line it up in the centre. That's it, and stick it down. Again, this will pull up and down. I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm folding over and I'm going to stick it down. So this time I will put a bit of tape on it just to show you what I mean. So first layer I actually use glue, but you can just put a strip of double-sided tape along that edge. And then just very carefully make sure your tabs are obviously flat and kind of let it find its own way, but just make sure it's level. And then stick it there. So this is now your pulley card. Okay, so that's all the mechanisms done. It's now just a case of decorating. So what I did for the decoration on my front piece was really quite simple. You could do exactly what you want, but I will just give you the measurements that I used. So I have a Whisper White panel here, again taken from the scraps that we had left over. And this measured 14 centimetres by 9.5 centimetres. And then the DSP part on here, I just made it 0.5 centimetre smaller. So that's 13.5 centimetres by 9 centimetres. And then for the greeting, again, I used a piece of the reverse of the DSP. Now this measured 9.5 centimetres by 3.3 centimetres. I know that's an odd measurement, but the reason I did it was because I wanted the pattern to match here. So, you know, you can adjust it to whatever papers or whatever you're using. And then the Whisper White panel just at the top there is 2.3 centimetres by 9.5. So I just matted those together, tied some twine round, and then popped it on top. And that is your card finished. So I hope you find the video helpful. It's one of those that's a bit easier to actually demonstrate rather than try and explain. So I hope, obviously, it's been helpful for you and you'll give it a go. Thanks very much. Bye.